Wife said I will not fulfill your desires, so I showed her will not sustain her lifestyle. David met Jessica in college when they were both 18, and from the moment they started dating, he was captivated by her charm. She had an energy that could fill any room, effortlessly social, ambitious, and brimming with big dreams. She spoke about future plans with such conviction that David found himself believing in them too. He admired her drive and confidence, her ability to command attention, and most of all, her unwavering belief that they were meant for something greater than a mundane existence. Jessica talked about a successful career in marketing, or perhaps running her own business someday. She was never short on ideas, and David found it exciting to be around someone who was so determined. He himself was more grounded, focused on stability, and had clear goals for his future. He studied finance, worked hard in internships, and made calculated moves to ensure he would build a solid career. After college, they got married. David landed a promising job at a financial firm and quickly moved up the rank. He worked long hours, putting in the effort to secure their future. Jessica, on the other hand, started working at a marketing agency but found the environment stifling. She claimed the office was toxic, the management incompetent, and the work beneath her. She quit after a few months, convinced she was meant for something better. At first, David supported her decision. He believed in her potential and encouraged her to find something that truly made her happy. She reassured him that she had a plan, maybe freelancing, maybe launching a startup. But the months passed, and she didn't follow through on any of her ideas. Instead, she started another job at a different company, only to leave within 6 months, citing the same reasons as before. Then another. And another. Each time, there was a new excuse. An unreasonable boss, a backstabbing coworker, a stifling work environment. It was never her fault. She convinced David that she was simply too talented, too ambitious for the mediocrity of the corporate world. "I'm not meant to be stuck in some soulless job," she would say. "I need to find my real calling." While Jessica was between jobs, David's salary was more than enough to sustain them. He didn't mind being the primary provider, at least for a while. But what did start to bother him was how her lifestyle remained unaffected by her lack of income. She still dined at upscale restaurants, shopped for designer handbags, and insisted on regular spa treatments. At first, she used her savings to support herself. Then, little by little, she started dipping into David's income. She justified it easily. "You're doing so well, babe. We're a team. What's yours is mine, right?" Jessica also developed a taste for luxury that far exceeded their means. She insisted they move into a high-rise apartment in an expensive part of the city. "We deserve to live somewhere nice," she argued. "Somewhere that reflects who we are." David hesitated but ultimately agreed, thinking it was a worthwhile investment in their future. But the spending didn't stop there. Jessica started traveling more, first with friends, then solo. She took impromptu trips to Paris, Milan, and Santorini, talking about how she needed to find herself and gain inspiration. She returned each time with new designer clothes, expensive skincare, and stories of luxurious dinners. David, exhausted from his relentless workload, couldn't always keep up. He was constantly at the office, working overtime, grinding to ensure they could afford this lifestyle. He started questioning why he was working so hard while Jessica spent her days at yoga classes, browsing high-end boutiques, and meeting friends for brunch. He tried to talk to her about it, asking if she had considered looking for a new job or following through on her entrepreneurial ideas. Jessica scoffed, waving off the suggestion. "You don't understand. I'm working on myself right now. When the time is right, I'll figure it out." David tried to be patient, but as time went on, resentment began to build. The Jessica he had married, the ambitious, driven woman who had once talked about achieving great things, seemed to have disappeared. In her place was someone who acted entitled to a life of luxury without contributing to it. Then came the credit card bills. David noticed unfamiliar charges, extravagant purchases, and expensive subscriptions. When he confronted her, Jessica brushed it off. "Babe, it's just a little splurge. You make good money, what's the big deal?" The big deal was that her spending was growing out of control. He started monitoring their accounts more closely, only to find that she had maxed out multiple credit cards. She had taken out loans in both of their names without consulting him. One evening, after a particularly grueling 14-hour workday, David came home to find Jessica hosting a lavish dinner party. The dining table was covered in gourmet dishes, expensive wine bottles lined the counter, and a group of socialites lounged on their designer couch. Jessica greeted him with a careless wave. "Oh, you're home. Join us. We're just having a little celebration." David looked around, feeling like a stranger in his own home. These weren't their friends. They were people Jessica had met at exclusive social events, influencers and trust fund heirs who had no concept of hard work. He stood there in silence, watching as Jessica laughed, sipping wine that cost more than his monthly car payment. Later that night, after the guests had left and the apartment was filled with the lingering scent of expensive perfume, David confronted her. "This can't go on, Jess. You're spending money we don't have. Do you even realize how hard I work to support this lifestyle?" Jessica rolled her eyes, completely unbothered. "David, relax. You act like we're broke. You make plenty. Why are you suddenly so stingy?" "Because this isn't sustainable," he snapped. "You don't work. You don't contribute. You just spend. What happened to the woman I married? The one who had dreams and ambition?" Jessica sighed, crossing her arms. "Maybe I realized I don't want to grind away in some boring job. Maybe I deserve more than that." David felt something in him crack. He had sacrificed sleep, peace, and time for this woman, for a dream that was no longer mutual. He had built a life for them, only to realize he was carrying it alone. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time, he wondered if they had ever wanted the same future. David had worked for this moment for years. Late nights, early mornings, endless reports, meetings that stretched until exhaustion blurred the line between his work and personal life. But finally it had paid off. He had secured a major promotion, Senior Financial Director, a title that came with an impressive salary bump and a substantial year-end bonus. This was it. This was the kind of breakthrough he had dreamed about, the kind of milestone that made all the sacrifices worth it. And all he wanted now was to share this victory with his wife. He left the office that evening with a rare lightness in his step. On the way home, he stopped at Jessica's favorite restaurant and ordered takeout, a lavish spread of seafood, steak, and wine that had cost a small fortune. He also picked up a designer bracelet he had seen her admiring weeks ago. It had been a long time since he had seen real joy on her face, and tonight, he wanted to see it again. When he stepped into their penthouse apartment, Jessica was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. The sight of her, perfectly manicured nails, a silk robe draped carelessly over her designer loungewear, not a single trace of stress or fatigue on her face, was such a stark contrast to how he felt after another grueling day at work that it almost made him pause. "Babe," he said, trying to contain his excitement. "Guess what?" Jessica didn't even look up from her screen. He set the bags down, walked over to her, and placed the jewelry box in front of her. "I got the promotion." Silence. Jessica's eyes flickered to the box. Then, with a sigh, she set her phone aside and picked it up, opening it lazily. She turned the bracelet over in her hands, unimpressed. "Oh, that was it. Just, oh." David waited for more, for her to get up, to hug him, to at least smile, but instead, she closed the box and placed it on the coffee table like it was a cheap souvenir. Then she reached for her phone again. Frustration prickled in his chest. "That's all you have to say?" Jessica let out an exaggerated sigh. "I mean, congrats, babe. That's great for you. For him." As if this promotion didn't also mean more financial security for her, for the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. as if she hadn't been the one pushing him to work harder, to provide more. Trying to shake off the sting of her indifference, he gestured toward the table. I got dinner from your favorite place. Thought we could celebrate. Jessica barely spared the food a glance before wrinkling her nose. Oh, actually, I already ate. I had sushi with Brianna and the girls. David clenched his jaw. He had spent hundreds on this meal, thinking it would be a moment they could share. Instead, she had been out, dining on overpriced sashimi with women who had never worked a day in their lives. But before he could process that disappointment, Jessica suddenly did look at him. Really looked at him, for the first time that evening. Speaking of, she said, perking up, I need to ask you for something. David already knew what that meant. She scrolled on her phone for a second, then turned the screen toward him. There's this exclusive networking retreat happening in Ibiza next month. It's a huge opportunity. Brianna and the others already booked their spots, and I can't be the only one left out. David stared at the price. $8,000. Just for the entrance fee. Not counting the flights, the hotel, the designer outfits she would undoubtedly insist on buying. His exhaustion returned in full force. Jessica, are you serious? She frowned. Of course, I'm serious. He exhaled slowly. Jessica, I just told you I got a promotion, and your first reaction is to ask me for $8,000? She rolled her eyes. Oh my God, David, don't be so dramatic. It's not just a trip, it's an investment. Do you have any idea how important networking is? If I make the right connections, it could change everything. Change what? You don't even have a job. Jessica's expression darkened. Wow. That's really nice, David. Way to support your wife. Support you? He let out a bitter laugh. Jessica, that's all I do. I work 60-hour weeks so you can sip cocktails at rooftop bars and go on last-minute networking getaways. I pay for this apartment, your clothes, your dinners, your facials, your Pilates classes, everything. And you don't even say thank you. You didn't even care about my promotion. Jessica crossed her arms. You're acting like I don't contribute at all. David laughed in disbelief. You don't contribute. You don't work. You don't even try. You've quit every job you've ever had because it was toxic or unfulfilling or beneath you. And now you expect me to throw thousands of dollars at some fantasy about networking in Ibiza? Jessica's lips curled into a smirk. You sound really insecure right now. David stiffened. Excuse me. You're getting so worked up about money, she said, shaking her head in disappointment. Like, it's just money, David. You make plenty. But for some reason, you get off on making me feel bad for not being a corporate drone like you. Not everyone wants to be a boring finance guy. Some of us actually want more out of life. The way she said it, like his entire career, the years of sacrifice, the long hours and exhaustion, was meaningless. Jessica sighed dramatically. You know what? Forget it. I'll just ask my dad. That was the final blow. Jessica's father had never approved of David. He had always thought his daughter deserved to marry someone richer, someone born into wealth, not someone who had to work for it. David had spent years trying to prove himself, showing that he could provide, that he was more than just a middle-class nobody trying to keep up with Jessica's expensive taste. And now, after everything, she would rather ask her father for money than show an ounce of appreciation for her own husband. David's hands curled into fists. He had never felt more humiliated in his life. I hope he says no, David said coldly. Because I'm not paying for it. Jessica scoffed. Wow. So this is the kind of husband you are? Just holding money over my head like some kind of power move? Holding money over your head? Jessica, do you even hear yourself? You don't work. You don't pay for anything. You live in a luxury apartment, you drive a car you didn't buy, you spend money that isn't yours, and you think I'm the problem. Jessica rolled her eyes again and stood up, grabbing her phone. You know what? I don't need this energy tonight. I'll just go out with the girls. David could only stare as she breezed past him, grabbed her designer purse, and walked out the door without another word. He stood there for a long time. The untouched dinner, the unopened bottle of wine, the discarded bracelet, all of it suddenly felt like proof of his failure. Because it was only in that moment, standing in the silence of their expensive apartment, that he finally admitted the truth to himself. Jessica didn't love him. She never had. She loved what he could give her. And for the first time in their marriage, David wondered what it would feel like to walk away. David sat at his desk, rubbing his temples as he stared at the bank statements in front of him. He had always kept track of their finances, but work had consumed him so much over the past months that he hadn't checked the accounts as closely as he should have. He had trusted Jessica, maybe not to earn money, but at the very least to be responsible with it. Now, looking at the numbers on the screen, he realized what a stupid assumption that had been. Jessica had racked up over $30,000 in credit card debt. David scrolled through the statements, his stomach turning with every extravagant, senseless purchase. Luxury handbags, high-end clothing, spa memberships, overpriced dinners, random online shopping sprees. It was endless. $4,000 at a designer boutique. $2,000 for a holistic retreat she had never even mentioned. $800 for a silk robe. He found a $5,000 charge for a single weekend trip to Miami, without him. She had gone with her friends under the excuse of a networking getaway, yet here it was, charged to a card he had never authorized her to use. His chest tightened with rage. He had been breaking his back to build their future, and she had been spending his hard-earned money like it grew on trees. And the worst part? She never even told him. Jessica had maxed out multiple credit cards, opening new ones behind his back, piling up debt that he would be left cleaning up. David felt sick. For years, he had ignored the warning signs, let things slide, and convinced himself that Jessica just needed time to find her passion, her career, her purpose. But this wasn't a phase. This wasn't a mistake. This was who she was. She had never planned to contribute. She had never intended to stop spending. And she had never cared about the sacrifices he made to keep her comfortable. By the time Jessica strolled into the apartment later that evening, David was already seated at the kitchen table, his laptop open and the bank statements printed in a thick stack beside him. "Hey," she greeted casually, kicking off her designer heels. "I'm so exhausted. Brianna and I did a Pilates class, then got facials and—" "Sit down," David interrupted, his voice firm. Jessica blinked at his tone, immediately frowning. "Excuse me." "Sit down." For a moment, she hesitated, as if weighing whether she would indulge him. Then, with a dramatic sigh, she plopped down on the chair across from him, her arms crossed. "What's this about?" David slid the bank statements toward her. Jessica barely glanced at them. "Okay, and $30,000, Jessica." His voice was dangerously low. "That's how much debt you've racked up on credit cards, in my name." Jessica's face barely twitched. "I mean, it's not that bad," she said, shrugging. David felt his blood pressure spike. "Not that bad? Do you have any idea what you've done? You've been lying to me. You opened credit cards without telling me. You maxed them out on nonsense." Jessica rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, calm down. You're acting like I gambled away our life savings." "You might as well have." She scoffed. "David, you're being so dramatic. It's just money. You make good money, don't you? What's the big deal?" The casual way she said it, as if his money was hers to spend however she pleased, sent a fresh wave of fury through him. He inhaled deeply, trying to keep his composure. "From now on, you're on a budget." Jessica's expression finally changed. "What?" "You heard me," he said, locking eyes with her. "I've set a spending limit for you. $200 a week. That's it." Jessica laughed. At first, David thought she was joking, mocking him, but then he saw the way she threw her head back, shaking with laughter, as if he had said something completely ridiculous. $200? She cackled. David, that's not even a single brunch. His jaw tightened. I'm serious. Your cards are frozen. The only money you'll have access to is $200 a week, and that's final. Jessica's laughter vanished. Her mouth opened slightly, her perfectly manicured nails clenching against the table. You can't do that. I can, and I have. Jessica slammed her hands on the table. Are you insane? You're treating me like a child. No, I'm treating you like a reckless, irresponsible adult who can't be trusted with money, David snapped. Jessica's face twisted in anger. You don't have the right to control my spending. Oh, but you have the right to spend my money however you want? Jessica stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. This is financial abuse, she shrieked. You're literally abusing me right now. Do you have any idea how controlling this is? Limiting my money? Making me beg you for an allowance? You're trying to punish me. David exhaled through his nose, his patience hanging by a thread. Jessica, I am not punishing you. I am saving us from bankruptcy because you refuse to take any responsibility for your actions. Jessica's lip curled. You're a misogynist. That's what this is. You want to control me. You're threatened by the idea of me having financial freedom. David let out a bitter laugh. Financial freedom? You don't even have a job, Jessica. What freedom are you talking about? Jessica threw a crystal water glass at the wall. It shattered instantly, pieces scattering across the marble floor. David didn't flinch. He didn't move. He just stared at her, watching as she seethed, her chest heaving, her fists clenched. He had seen Jessica angry before, when a restaurant messed up her order, when a boutique didn't have a dress in her size, when she got a scratch on her luxury purse. But this? This was something else. This was pure entitlement. Jessica wasn't upset because she had done something wrong. She was upset because she was finally facing consequences. She took a slow, deep breath and then, just like that, her expression softened. Her voice turned delicate, almost wounded. Babe, she whispered, stepping closer. I think we're both just overwhelmed. Maybe we just need to take a breath, okay? Let's not fight. David didn't move. Jessica pouted, her fingers grazing his arm. We love each other. We don't need to do this. David looked at her. For years, he had fallen for this. The tantrums when she didn't get her way. The manipulation when she needed something from him. The fake softness when she realized she was losing control. But not anymore. $200, he repeated coldly. Jessica's mask cracked. She pulled her hand away sharply, her eyes burning with fury. You'll regret this, she hissed. David simply leaned back in his chair, staring at the shattered glass on the floor. No, he said. I won't. David knew something was wrong the moment he received an alert from his bank. At first, he thought it was a mistake. The email claimed there was a new credit card application under his name, one he had never authorized. His stomach twisted. He hadn't applied for a new card. He opened the email and clicked the link, logging into his account. His heart pounded as he scanned the details. The application had been submitted just 1 hour ago, with his exact personal information, his social security number, his employment details, even his mother's maiden name as the security question. David's blood ran cold. There was only one person who had access to that information. Jessica. His hands tightened into fists. She had stolen his identity. For a long time, David had suspected that Jessica had no real intention of changing. But this? This was beyond selfish spending. This was fraud. She had tried to open a new credit card under his name, likely because he had cut her off. She must have been furious about the spending limits, and rather than accepting responsibility, she had done the unthinkable. She had decided to commit identity theft against her own husband. David forced himself to breathe. He needed proof. He pulled up the bank's fraud department and dialed. A robotic voice answered first, followed by a customer service representative. Sir, we can see the application was submitted online from a device previously linked to your account, the representative explained. David already knew which device. Jessica's laptop. He clenched his jaw, his voice steady despite the anger boiling inside him. Cancel it. Mark it as fraud. And flag my account. No new credit applications without direct verification from me. The representative assured him they would handle it, but David barely heard. His mind was racing, piecing together what this really meant. Jessica wasn't just careless with money. She was dangerous. That night, he acted like nothing had happened. When Jessica came home, her arms full of shopping bags that she had no money to pay for, David sat at the kitchen counter, staring at her, silent. She flashed him a fake smile. "Hey babe." He didn't respond. Jessica didn't notice. She was too busy admiring herself in the hallway mirror, adjusting her hair, checking her phone. And that's when David noticed something else. Her phone never left her hand anymore. She was always texting someone. His stomach churned as a new thought hit him. Who was she talking to? That night, as Jessica slept beside him, David lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Everything felt rotten. The betrayal. The manipulation. The way Jessica had dismissed him, humiliated him, stolen from him, and then acted like he was the villain. And now, she was hiding something. He needed to know what. David had never been the kind of man to check his wife's phone. He had never invaded her privacy, had never felt the need to. But she had crossed every line. So at 3 a.m., when Jessica rolled over in her sleep, David carefully reached for her phone. It was locked. He expected that. But Jessica wasn't smart. She had always been careless. David took a deep breath, then gently lifted her hand and pressed her finger against the sensor. The phone unlocked instantly. His pulse roared in his ears as he scrolled through her messages. And then, he found it. Jessica had been texting her ex-boyfriend, a man she had once bragged about dating before him, one of those wealthy trust fund types who had inherited everything without working a day in his life. David's hands shook as he read the messages. Jessica, I can't keep living like this. David is being a controlling psycho. Jessica, he cut off my spending. He's trying to trap me. Jessica, I need a way out. I need to be taken care of. Ex-boyfriend, you know I'd always take care of you, baby. You don't deserve to be treated like this. Jessica, I miss the way things used to be with you. You always spoiled me. Ex-boyfriend, I still would. Just say the word. Jessica, you might get your chance soon. David gripped the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. His wife, was scheming to leave him for another man. Not just leave him, manipulate him first. He scrolled further. Jessica, if I play this right, I can get half of everything in the divorce. Jessica, he's so stupid, he'll never see it coming. Ex-boyfriend, you should be with a real man anyway. Not some boring finance guy. David's vision blurred with rage. She had never loved him. She had never wanted to build a life with him. She had only wanted what he could give her. Jessica shifted slightly in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. David inhaled deeply, forcing himself to stay calm. Rage wouldn't help him. A plan would. David took screenshots of everything. He sent them to himself, then deleted the evidence from her phone. He placed it back on the nightstand, exactly where it had been. Then he got out of bed, grabbed his laptop, and opened a new browser tab. He searched, best divorce lawyers in the city. He had been patient. He had been kind. He had sacrificed everything for Jessica. But now? Now, he was done. David spent the next week quietly preparing. He started gathering everything: financial statements, evidence of Jessica's reckless spending, proof of her debts, her fraud attempt, and, of course, the messages proving her affair and premeditated plan to scam him in the divorce. He froze their account. He had the bank block any new credit applications. He met with a divorce attorney, one of the best, who immediately saw Jessica's behavior for what it was. She's a classic gold digger, the lawyer said bluntly, flipping through the evidence. And she's not as smart as she thinks she is. David nodded. I want this done right. I don't want her getting a cent more than she deserves. The lawyer smirked. Oh, don't worry. She won't. David had always been rational, but for the first time, he wanted Jessica to suffer. Not in the way she had made him suffer, not with lies or humiliation or manipulation, but with cold, brutal consequences. She thought she was trapping him. She thought he was just some boring finance guy she could squeeze dry before running back to her rich ex. She thought he would be stupid enough to let it happen. She had no idea what was coming. And David? David couldn't wait to watch her fall. David had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Every detail, every step, had been planned carefully. He hadn't confronted Jessica. He hadn't argued. He hadn't given her the smallest hint of what was coming. He had smiled when she spoke, nodded when she whined about her so-called financial abuse, and let her believe she was still in control. But tonight? Tonight was the night he took his life back. The moment Jessica left the apartment for another one of her networking dinners, which he now strongly suspected was just a date with her wealthy ex, David went into action. A moving truck pulled up 5 minutes later. David had packed everything in advance: his clothes, his personal belongings, every single thing in the apartment that he had paid for. The movers worked efficiently, clearing out his office, his wardrobe, his electronics. By the time they were done, the apartment looked strangely empty. Jessica still had her things, of course, her designer clothes, her jewelry, her endless collection of handbags and shoes. But everything that had made this place a home was gone. David stood in the doorway for a moment, surveying the damage. The couch where they had once sat, laughing over movies in their early years, now looked cold and unfamiliar. The dining table, where he had tried to celebrate his promotion, sat untouched, collecting dust from the countless nights Jessica had been out, spending his money while he worked late. The expensive chandelier Jessica had insisted on getting now felt as empty as their marriage. David took a deep breath, turned back toward the counter, and placed 3 things neatly in the center. First, a manila folder containing the divorce papers. Second, a thick stack of financial statements, evidence of her reckless spending, proof of her fraud, screenshots of her texts to her ex. And finally, a letter. It was simple, direct. A final goodbye to the woman who had drained him for years. Jessica, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. You've spent years thinking you could do whatever you wanted without consequences. You lied. You spent money you didn't have. You stole from me. And worst of all, you thought I was stupid enough to let you get away with it. I was patient. I was kind. I worked my ass off to give you everything you wanted, but it was never enough for you. This isn't just about the money. It's about respect, something you never had for me. You wanted to trap me in a marriage where I provided for you while you schemed behind my back. You thought you could leave me when it suited you, when you found a richer man to take my place. But you underestimated me. Here's what happens now. We are getting divorced. You have 30 days to vacate the apartment. Your name was never on the lease. That means you have no legal right to stay. The landlord is aware, and they will have you removed if you don't leave voluntarily. All joint bank accounts have been closed. The credit cards in my name are frozen. You have no access to my money anymore. I have documented everything, every dollar you spent, every lie you told, and every illegal thing you did. If you try to fight this in court, you will lose. You once told me I'd regret this, that I would regret cutting you off. You were wrong. The only thing I regret is not leaving sooner. Good luck finding someone else to fund your lifestyle. You're on your own now, David. He placed the keys to the apartment on top of the letter, then walked out. For the first time in years, he felt free. Jessica's world falls apart. Jessica arrived home hours later, stumbling in with her heels in one hand and her phone in the other. Her evening had gone well. Her ex had been flirting with her all night, dropping hints about how much he had missed her, how much he still cared. He had paid for everything, of course, dinner, drinks, even the Uber home. She had been so sure that she was on the verge of securing a new future, one where she wouldn't have to deal with David's whining about money, his pathetic little budget restrictions, his stupid rules. But the moment she stepped into the apartment, something felt wrong. The air felt too still. She dropped her purse and looked around. The couch was gone. The TV was missing. Her heart pounded as she moved further inside. David's desk was empty. His closet had been cleared out. Her mouth went dry as she spotted the folder on the counter. Slowly, she approached, her pulse hammering in her ears. She flipped through the documents, panic rising with every page. Divorce papers, bank statements, screenshots of her texts. Jessica staggered back, gripping the counter. No. No, no, no. She reached for her phone, her fingers shaking, and dialed David's number. Straight to voicemail. She called again. And again. Nothing. She sent a text. David. Where the hell are you? No response. Her breathing grew ragged as she flipped through the last piece of paper, the letter. And as she read his final words, something inside her snapped. She threw the letter across the room, screaming in rage. He left her. Not just left, he had erased her. He had taken everything, the money, the apartment, the stability. And worst of all, he had made sure she had nowhere to go. Jessica grabbed the folder and marched to the bedroom, fumbling for her laptop. She needed a plan. Her ex. He would take care of her. He had said it himself. He still cared. She opened her messages, heart racing, and typed. Hey baby. So, funny story. Looks like I need a place to stay for a little while, winking face. She hit send. And waited. And waited. And then, a new message popped up. Ex-boyfriend. Damn, that sucks. Hope you figure something out. Jessica froze. Her hands went cold. She typed again. Wait, what do you mean? You said you'd take care of me. A pause. Then, ex-boyfriend, I meant, like, emotionally. Not financially. LOL. I can't have you moving in. That's crazy. Jessica felt sick. She stared at the screen, willing the words to change. They didn't. Her lifeline had just vanished. And now? Now she was completely alone. She looked back at David's letter, at the cold, final words staring back at her. You're on your own now. Her breathing hitched. For the first time in her life, Jessica realized she had nothing. No money. No safety net. No one left to manipulate. And worst of all, no way out. The divorce was finalized in record time. Jessica, in her desperation, had tried to fight it at first. She had hired a lawyer, a cheap one because she could no longer afford anyone competent, and attempted to argue for spousal support. But David had come prepared. He had proof of her financial irresponsibility, her attempted fraud, and even her plans to manipulate him for money while she schemed with her ex. His lawyer had shut down her arguments within minutes, presenting the bank records, the credit card statements, the fraudulent loan application, and most damning of all, the text messages that exposed her intentions. Jessica had gone pale in the courtroom when they were read aloud. By the time the judge ruled in David's favor, she had barely muttered a word. The final settlement? David kept everything. The bank accounts were his. The investments? His. The car? His. The apartment? His. Jessica was left with nothing. She had 30 days to leave the apartment, the same apartment she had once treated like her personal palace, and after that she was on her own. David walked out of the courthouse without looking back. For the first time in years, he felt like he could finally breathe. Jessica's fall from grace. The first few weeks after the divorce were a waking nightmare for Jessica. She had assumed, foolishly, that her friends would support her. But the moment it became clear she was broke, they started pulling away. The brunch invites stopped. The group chats went silent. Even Brianna, her closest friend, suddenly had no time to meet. Jessica had always thought of herself as part of an elite social circle, but now she realized the ugly truth. Her friendships had been built on money, status, and appearances. And now that she had none of those things, She was worthless to them. Her ex-boyfriend, the man she had been so sure would take her in, blocked her number after she sent one too many desperate messages. She tried to move back home, but her parents, who had been enabling her for years, finally had enough. "You made your choices, Jessica," her mother had said coldly after listening to her beg. "It's time to live with them." Jessica was homeless within a month. The luxury she had once taken for granted, expensive brunches, designer clothes, spa days, had been replaced by the cold reality of struggling to make rent in a dingy, shared apartment with 3 strangers. She had to get a job. For the first time in years, she had to work. A real job, one that didn't involve spending someone else's money. She landed a receptionist position at a small firm, barely making enough to survive. She hated it. The hours were long. The pay was insulting. And worst of all, she had to take orders from other people, people she used to look down on. There was no one left to rescue her. No wealthy husband. No trust fund boyfriend. No friends to bail her out. Jessica had finally hit rock bottom. And for the first time in her entire life, she had no one to blame but herself. David's new beginning. While Jessica struggled, David thrived. With his newfound freedom, he focused on himself, his health, his career, and his peace of mind. He moved into a new home, one that wasn't filled with bad memories and broken trust. It was his own space, and for the first time, he didn't feel like he was just working to keep someone else happy. And then there was Megan. They met at a networking event, one David had actually wanted to attend, not one he had been manipulated into paying for. Megan was nothing like Jessica. She was independent, ambitious, and completely self-sufficient. She wasn't looking for a man to fund her lifestyle. She had built her own. Their conversations were effortless. She respected his work. She appreciated his time. And most importantly, she saw him as an equal partner, not a walking ATM. Their relationship wasn't built on control, manipulation, or money. It was built on mutual respect. And for David, that was priceless. Jessica's final humiliation. One night, months after the divorce, David and Megan were leaving a restaurant when he heard a familiar voice. He turned, and there she was. Jessica. She looked nothing like the woman he had once known. Her hair was messy, her clothes were cheap, and there was no trace of the arrogance she used to carry. For the first time, she looked ordinary. And when she saw David with Megan, her face crumpled. She had spent so long believing she was irreplaceable, that David would never find anyone better, that he would always crawl back. But now she was just another stranger from his past. Jessica swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. David. He didn't even hesitate. He simply took Megan's hand, gave Jessica a brief, indifferent glance, and walked away. Because Jessica was nothing but a bad memory now.